Do you delight in fright? Have you survived countless nights with Michael, Freddie, and Jason? Then welcome to AMC's Fearfest, a month-long celebration of your favorite horror classics. All October, AMC has non-stop scares with marathons of the most can't-miss horror classics. We're talking Halloween, Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, and Final Destination. Plus all the icons of fright you've come to expect from Fearfest, including Carrie, Jeepers Creepers, and It. This year, Fearfest is truly a carnival of frights, and it is hosted by the incomparable Janelle Monáe. Even the most unhinged slasher has nothing on our Hallow Queen. AMC's Fearfest, these aren't just scary movies. These are the scares you love to come back to every October. Embrace the joy of horror with Fearfest, all October on AMC. Welcome back to another old edition of Nightmare Fuel Creeps and Peepers, the final revisiting of some of my favorite early Nightmare Fuel stories, since tomorrow is Halloween. And tomorrow you will get a new Halloween story called The Dead House. Today we are revisiting Sleep Paralysis. Originally released last October, Friday the 18th, I was nervous about attempting to tell a story that is so deeply rooted in Hmong culture. As a white dude, I wanted it to come across as respectful. I think it's good to try and imagine life from someone outside of your own culture's perspective. Some consider that to be cultural appropriation. But would it be better to only stay in your own narrow little lane and try not to access the minds of other genders, beliefs, and races? I don't think so personally. I think the world would be better if we all tried to understand each other a little bit more and be reminded how similar we all truly are. It was fun to set this story in one of my favorite cities. I toured through San Francisco doing stand-up comedy so many times over the years. I feel like I've lived there for a while, and it was very fun to revisit it. Thanks as well to AMC's Fearfest for sponsoring this Nightmare Fuel re-release. Highly recommend noise cancellation headphones for the ultimate listening experience. Time now for the tale of sleep paralysis. Sherry Vu stares down at the bed in the sterile, halogen bulb-lit hospital room on the 8th floor of the St. Francis Memorial Hospital in San Francisco's Lower Nob Hill neighborhood. Her hard-working, handsome, mischievous but also dutiful 23-year-old son and firstborn child Kevin lays comatose before her. She and the other members of her family that share her household are with her in the room, and they're all just as scared as they are confused. He was fine. He was totally fine when he went to bed just the night before. He hadn't been in a car accident or slipped and fallen down. Nothing. He hadn't been attacked, hadn't been sick. Kevin had never had any major health problems before in his entire life. He'd never even broken a bone. The most medically concerning issue he had ever had growing up was a mild case of appendicitis that didn't require surgery. Up until yesterday, Kevin had appeared to be the picture of health in every conceivable way. Sherry assumed he'd probably experimented with drugs like weed and magic mushrooms and maybe more. He was young and living in San Francisco after all. But he'd never, to her knowledge, struggled with anything close to addiction. He didn't even seem depressed, ever. He appeared to love his life. He had a date lined up for the weekend he was looking forward to. He was driving a new car he'd bought after graduating college and getting a job working in Square's IT department, where he was yet to ever call in sick. And he'd been going to the gym where he ran and lifted weights 3 or 4 times a week. He should not be laying comatose in a hospital bed. He shouldn't be worrying her and everyone else in the family sick. The only thing Sherry could think of that had been different, and she'd already told the doctors this, was that he'd had a bit of trouble sleeping the past few nights. He said he'd been having some nightmares, which was unusual for him. But he didn't seem terribly bothered by them, more like he just found it odd. But that was it. And how could a few bad dreams lead to not just waking up this morning? His heart rate was still strong. He was still breathing normally. But when his alarm went off, he didn't answer it. Sherry had yelled to wake him up, thought she'd heard him stir, and left for work. But then her mother-in-law, Mai, who had lived with her and her husband Yang and their 2 grown children ever since her husband died years earlier, called her less than an hour later in a total panic. She said she couldn't wake him. She tried yelling at him, moving him around, shaking him, but nothing worked. Sherry told Mai she'd call an ambulance, and she did. That was almost 13 hours ago. Now it was 8 p.m. and doctors had him hooked up to all kinds of wires and tubes and monitors. They'd been running tests on him all day. But they still had no answers for why all of his vitals were fine, but he just would not wake up. "I'm sorry we don't have more answers at the moment, but I do have some good news," said Dr. Laura Kramer, the young, poised, bright-eyed neurologist assigned to her son, doing her best to make the Vu family feel like things were all under control. "His brain activity looks good, very good actually. So he's not unable to wake due to being in a vegetative state, which would be one of the worst-case scenarios." Sherry shook her head in acknowledgement as she absorbed the confusing information. Before she could ask any questions, her daughter Nicole jumped in. "Is that normal?" she asked. Nicole, Kevin's little sister and only sibling, was a 20-year-old communications major at the University of San Francisco. She'd also been at the hospital all day, worrying and waiting for answers. "No," said Dr. Kramer flatly. "It's actually exceptionally rare, but it does happen." "Why?" inquired Nicole. Nicole felt like she was still in shock. She didn't feel sad yet, or scared really, just so confused. And the student in her felt like if she could ask the right question, the doctors would have some kind of, "Aha, I didn't think of that" moment, and be able to give Kevin some kind of shot or procedure that would snap him out of whatever this was. "For a number of reasons," replied Dr. Kramer. "It can happen due to damage to specific regions of the brain that are critical for consciousness. It can be due to metabolic imbalances such as a severe electrolyte depletion. It could be brought on by drug intoxication, a serious infection, complications with blood flow to the brain inflammation, and I'm sure I'm leaving out a few other possibilities. Rest assured, we'll be looking into every single one of them." Nicole paused and stared at her brother, feeling defeated, her brow furrowed with concern and curiosity, before asking still more questions. "What about his eyes? Why are they moving under his lids like that?" It was so maddening to watch him lay there, breathing so normally, vitals all as they should be, looking like he was totally fine, like he was just taking a nap. Except you literally couldn't wake him up. It was like a cruel joke. Nicole didn't even know something like this was possible before it happened. None of them did. "He's in REM sleep," explained Dr. Kramer. "So, he's dreaming?" asked Nicole. "Not necessarily," said the doctor. "It's very, very rare for someone to truly dream while in a comatose state, but it has happened. Most of the time, though, what we see is a much more limited form of REM that mimics the sleep stage but doesn't actually produce any dreams." "Well, if he is dreaming, I hope they're good dreams and not nightmares," Nicole mumbled before walking over and sitting down next to her brother and holding his hand. As she took his hand in hers for the first time, she noticed he was wearing a bracelet on his right wrist. It looked a lot like the one she'd seen those fake Buddhist monks always trying to hand out to people to scam them in various tourist hotspots around town. Except instead of it only being made up of those dark brown wooden beads, there was also a smooth, flattened, oval-shaped stone with 3 little holes in it for a centerpiece. The stone reminded her of a pearl in both color and texture, but she didn't know what it was. When Dr. Kramer walked out of the room a few moments later, she noticed that her mother, father, and grandmother were all also wearing virtually identical bracelets. "Mom, why are all of you wearing these?" Nicole asked. "Oh," her mother responded, looking down at hers and seeming as if she would have started to laugh in more normal circumstances. "Aunt Lee gave us these." She then looked over at her mother-in-law, whose eyes were focused on Kevin, before leaning in towards Nicole and whispering, "Some kind of Hmong superstitious thing. They're supposed to protect us from bad dreams and from the Dacho." Nicole looked at her brother, whose eyes continued to flutter rapidly beneath their lids, as if he was still dreaming, before asking, "What's the Dacho again? Is it that monster that Grandma used to talk about? The one that only seems to come after Hmong people? The one that kills you in your sleep?" Her mom nodded yes. Nicole rolled her eyes and shook her head before asking, "Oh my God, Too bad it doesn't protect you from comas. How come I didn't get one? You haven't really been home much since Aunt Lee showed up, her mom answered, before adding delicately, and you haven't been very welcoming towards her. She's weird, Nicole blurted out quickly and a little too loudly, causing her grandma to look in her direction. She smiled at her grandma before turning back towards her mother and whispering, honestly, she creeps me out, and it's hard to talk to her when she doesn't know a word of English. Nicole didn't add what really bothered her about her aunt. It was the same thing that bothered her about her grandma. She was embarrassed by her Hmong ways. It was like they were from another planet. While her Aunt Lee wasn't able to make it out of her homeland with her grandma, this was actually her first trip to America, and she'd been living in a Hmong community in Thailand since she was a young woman, her grandma and grandpa had fled Laos in the early 70s during the end of the Vietnam War. Her grandpa had done some kind of work for the CIA. He'd never said exactly what, and her dad made her promise her not to ask. And right before he and Nicole's grandma's village was taken over by the Viet Cong, they'd managed to flee before being killed, and they'd made it all the way to San Francisco. And her family had been here ever since. Luckily for Nicole, there wasn't a big Hmong community in San Francisco full of other people doing stuff she thought was weird and embarrassing. Most Hmong in Central California lived in Fresno or Sacramento, cities she'd been dragged to here and there for various festivals and holidays over the years. Nicole loved her grandma, and she loved her grandpa too before he passed away of lung cancer almost 10 years ago now. But they believed in the craziest shit that her friends thought was funny and fascinating, but it humiliated her. She hated how her grandma was always chanting in the Hmong language, a language she'd never bothered to try and understand, and doing stuff like lighting candles and burning incense or these little white rice paper coin things as sacrifices to various spirits and ancestors for protection from this or that demon or curse or whatever. Or she'd leave out full glasses of wine or bowls of perfectly good chicken or other food to pay her respects to ancestors and spirits and ask for their protection or blessings. And while not as often as when Grandpa was around, sometimes she would pay to have an actual shaman come over, and this odd middle-aged man would dance around in their house, while they all had to sit quietly and act respectfully, and he'd bang on this gong cymbal thing with a big mallet over and over while wearing this funny little red hat and burning more incense and all sorts of other rigmarole. Nicole felt like it was all just so absurd. Nicole's mom, Sherry, also wasn't the biggest fan of all of this, as she confided to Nicole many times over the years, but she'd tolerated the ways of her husband's family for the most part, and pretty much let Mai do whatever she wanted after her grandma moved in with them following her husband's passing. Until one day, the shaman brought over a live chicken and slit its throat in the living room. Nicole and her mom both screamed over that one. Kevin thought it was funny. He'd laughed so hard at the shaman holding the bloody, headless bird and yelling in Hmong, while their grandma also yelled at Nicole and Sherry for embarrassing and disrespecting her, while their dad Yang started cleaning the blood off of the floor and their dog Rudy tried to grab and eat the chicken head, that he'd ended up rolling around with tears leaking out of his eyes. After that debacle, Sherry made Yang talk to his mother. No more butchering anything inside the house. No more sacrificial animals, period. It was too much. Grandma stewed for months over that. Actually, she was still not fully over it. But she'd never sacrificed another animal since, at least not that anyone saw. But she did keep up with the old ways. And sometimes, her grandma would warn Nicole about the Dacho, the most feared of the Hmong boogeymen. Her grandma believed that this monster started to come for the Hmong people after the war, angry that they had fled from their homeland. And she told Nicole and Kevin both, time and time again, that if you didn't say the right prayers or make the right offerings for protection, the Dacho could fill your head with all kinds of terrible, terrible nightmares. Or worse, it could climb up onto your chest while you lay asleep and paralyze you. You'd be able to feel it. You'd be able to open your eyes and see it. But you wouldn't be able to move and defend yourself. And it would suck your very soul in what felt like the worst nightmare of your life out of your body, but one that was real. And then it would disappear and slip back out into the night before anyone else saw it. Then when your family found your dead body the next morning, it would look like you had just passed away in your sleep. And that's what the doctors would confirm. But Mai Vu, and any other Hmong still believing in the old ways, they'd know better. They'd know that the Dacho had killed you, and that certain rituals must be performed before it kept killing other Hmong in your midst. When Nicole once replied that since she and Kevin were only half Hmong, and mostly Irish on their mother's side, they should have nothing to worry about, since the Dacho could only suck out half of their souls, and maybe not even that thanks to the luck of the Irish. Grandma Mai was not amused. She demanded that they take the threat of Dacho very seriously. She insisted that it had killed many Hmong and would kill more who didn't respect the old ways. Nicole promised her grandmother she would take it seriously. But like her brother Kevin, she didn't believe in any of that bullshit. At least, that's what she'd always told her family, her friends, and herself. But now, as she watched her grandmother repeat some prayer over and over in her native tongue while she stared intensely at Kevin, while she clutched some little totem in her hand, she wondered if any of the crazy beliefs of her grandma might have any truth to them. If Nicole had directed her eyes up above her grandma and looked near the top of the window in Kevin's room, she would have stopped wondering right then and there if some of her grandma's crazy beliefs were true. She would have known. She would have seen Dacho, the Night Hag, the old witch, the pressing demon, the sleep djinn, the oppressive one. The creature known in 100 different cultures by 100 different names. An ancient creature that, no matter what it was called, was always the same demon. The same ancient, twisted, insatiable creature that appears as a monstrous and demented version of an old woman. An emaciated old witch-looking thing with an unkempt bush of thick, frizzy, matted white and wild hair, with flesh that looks sour, rotten, a sickly white-blue hued skin littered in warts and sores haphazardly scattered across her short and stumpy torso, saggy, withered breasts, and long, spidery limbs with elongated hands and feet and fingers and toes that end in ragged, jagged, needle-like claws. If Nicole would have just looked up, she would have caught a glimpse of the nude, troll-like beast with the long, crooked, pointed nose and the small, pinched mouth full of broken, rotten teeth and black, beady eyes clinging to the side of the building, holding itself 8 stories above the street below, hiding in the shadows of a dark, cloudy, moonless night, staring at her brother Kevin, filling his mind with terrible, unending nightmares, and preparing to feed upon his fear when his family leaves him in his bed, frozen and defenseless. Kevin Vu is oblivious to the direness of his current situation. He doesn't know he's in a hospital. Not yet. He doesn't know he's in a coma, or that his family is worried about him. At the moment, he thinks that after waking up from a night of terrible dreams he can't remember the details of, now he's at work, talking to his boss, Kasim. "Hey, Kevin," Kasim says as he walks up to Kevin's station. "I need you to go down and check on the servers in the basement. Make sure that they're all on and working like they're supposed to. I've been having some responsiveness issues all morning, and so have some of the other members of the team. We already checked the Wi-Fi, and it's not that or anything to do with connectivity. I want you to make sure it's not a hardware issue." "The basement?" Kevin asks, a bit confused. "I thought all of our servers were on the 16th floor." Kasim paused strangely before replying, and the hint of a sly smile flashed across his lips. "Most of the servers are on the 16th floor, but not all of them. I'm going to go check on the 16th floor myself. I want you to check the basement. Hit me up right away if you find anything. Or if you don't, check back in with me once you're done." All right, yeah, no problem, I'm on it." Kasim shot what felt like a strange knowing glance at Kevin before he walked away. The basement? The fuck? How have I never heard of servers down there before? I didn't even know we had a basement, Kevin thought to himself as he stood up and started walking towards the elevator. As he passed by his coworkers, most of whom he still didn't know, he couldn't help but notice that they all stopped and stared at him as he walked by. And they all, without exception, shot him a strange little grin. Kevin wondered if he was being set up for something. Some kind of practical joke. That's what it felt like. But that also seemed highly unlikely. He'd been working at Square for almost 3 months now, and neither Kasim nor any of the coworkers he had met so far seemed like the joking type. They were mostly just a bunch of uptight, woke nerds, to be honest. People who did everything by the book. They were all real big on proper pronouns and shit like that, and he doubted any of them even jaywalked or had more than 2 drinks when they went out. And they probably didn't go out much. Probably just stayed at home, watching investigative journalism docuseries and eating organic meals full of fake meat while they perfectly tracked their macronutrients on their healthy lifestyle apps. Right now, these nerds were creeping him out. By the time Kevin made it to the elevator, he had goosebumps. Every single person he passed stopped what they were doing, looked directly at him, and smiled that same stupid, strange little grin. He'd smiled back at the first dozen or so. Then he'd started to try and ignore them because they were skeeving him the fuck out. He felt so relieved once the doors closed and he couldn't see anyone else. He sighed and hoped he'd be alone in the basement. What the fuck was that? He said aloud to himself as he descended 10 stories down. After starting to relax a bit, he felt upset all over again when the doors opened. All the overhead lights were off. The only illumination was provided by the faint glow from a variety of little LED lights found on the servers themselves. Row after row of servers. He turned the light on his phone and stepped out, and then the doors slammed shut quickly behind him. So quickly they startled him. He didn't know elevator doors could slam. He'd never had that happen or heard of that happening before. Between the bad dreams the previous night, why couldn't he remember what those dreams were about? And all the strange little smiles, and now this. He really didn't like how his day was starting. Ow! Kevin was startled by a shadowy form suddenly moving, and moving quickly, in the darkness between 2 rows of servers. Hello? He nervously called out. Did Kasim send you down here to check the servers too? No response. Fuck this, Kevin now muttered as he turned around to hit the button to take the elevator back up. Wait, what? What? No, that's impossible. Kevin felt panic, intense panic, rising up and settling in his chest as he stared at a blank wall, where the elevator doors had been just a moment ago. Hey, Kevin, it's time, buddy. Kevin spun back around towards the servers to see his boss, Kasim, who no longer looked anything like an IT supervisor at a tech company. He looked like a cult member, or maybe a cult leader. He was wearing a long, flowing black robe and holding a torch, like an actual wooden, medieval-looking torch. And he had that same strange little grin on his face. What the fuck is going on, Kasim? Is this some kind of joke? Kevin asked, knowing that whatever was going on, it was far too strange and surreal and terrifying to just be a joke. Kasim laughed. Don't worry, Kevin. It's just time for your initiation is all, he sneered. Ah! Again, Kevin is startled by a shadowy form racing around amongst the servers. What is that? He yelled at Kasim. The master, of course, Kasim creepily replied. This isn't funny, man, Kevin said shakily. I don't want to be initiated. I want to go back to my desk. Not until you're initiated, Kevin. That's the rule, Kasim answered, with more than a touch of menace in his voice. Yeah, not until he's initiated, said another person who Kevin recognized from working on his floor, but whose name he didn't know. She was one of the people he'd walked past on his way to the basement. And she had the same strange little grin she had before, the same as Kasim. And now she was dressed like him as well, full robe and also carrying a torch. Not until he's initiated, repeated another coworker stepping out of the shadows. Where the hell are they all coming from? Kevin wondered. It was like they were materialized out of thin air. Another coworker popped out of the strange darkness behind them and repeated the same phrase. And then another did, and another, and they just kept showing up and saying the same creepy shit. All wearing identical robes, all carrying identical torches, all with the same insidious grins on their faces. Soon, there were what looked like at least 24 of them. Kevin stood frozen still, slack-jawed and in shock, as they now began to advance towards him in unison, while also all chanting together. Initiate him! Initiate him! Initiate him! Initiate him! He wanted to run, but there was nowhere to go. Only a blank wall stood behind him. More walls with no doors stood to his left and right. And this army of occultists who used to be his coworkers blocked any path to escape in front of him, still chanting and marching ever closer. When they were no more than 10 feet away, they stopped marching. While they continued to chant, they now parted their formation down the middle, creating a small pathway between Kevin and the servers. And that shadowy thing he'd seen before was on that path and advancing towards him. It looked somewhat like an old woman, an old naked woman with rotten, sour-looking skin, long limbs and claws, and a big rat's nest of white, filthy hair.
Initiate him,
she hissed as she stared intensely at Kevin with her black, beady eyes and drool dribbling down from the corners of her wrinkled, pursed mouth. Following her command, the rest of them quickly converged on Kevin as he screamed and fought in vain against them. They tore at his clothes and scratched at his skin. Soon they had him naked. They began to disrobe, and quickly they were naked as well, all grabbing and groping him. And as he screamed and realized in horror what these maniacs who were all still smiling the same terrible grin were going to do, one of them began to penetrate him. He cried out in pain and horror, and then he woke up. It was just another nightmare. But now, he seemed to have begun a new one. Kevin found himself frozen in place in what looked like a hospital room. He couldn't move. He couldn't speak. He was paralyzed. But he could see. And the thing from the servers, the old, nude, witch-like woman who had emerged from the shadows, was standing at the foot of his bed. Back at the Vu family home, Nicole, her parents, her grandmother, and her great-aunt Lee all sat in the living room, talking about Kevin and how they were going to manage the days ahead. They decided that while someone staying with him around the clock would probably be too big of a strain on all of them, they could certainly manage someone being with him at all times during the day, from about 6 or 7 a.m. until close to midnight. As they talked, Nicole's eyes kept drifting to Lee, who had been silent and continuously staring in her direction. Finally, Lee said something in Hmong to Nicole's grandmother, who then said, "Nicole, come here. Lee would like to give you something." Nicole knew that, of course, it would be a bracelet. She was handed one virtually identical to the bracelet her brother was wearing, except her flat, polished, pearl-like stone was a little bigger. But just like her brother's, it had 3 small holes in it. Nicole begrudgingly told her grandmother to thank her aunt for her, and then asked, "What is this stone?" Mai didn't need to ask, she knew. "With holes in it, it's called a serpent's egg. The jewel is polished moonstone." "Moonstone? That's a real thing?" Nicole asked. "Yes, of course it's real," her grandma replied with more than a hint of an eye roll. "It keeps you safe from bad dreams, and from the Dacho." Nicole now had to fight her own eye roll. How could her grandma believe this shit worked? Before her old, weird Aunt Lee showed up with her stupid bracelets, everything was fine. But then Kevin started to have bad dreams, and now he was in the hospital. But when her aunt aggressively gestured for her to put it on and snapped at her in Hmong, and when her grandma then insisted she stop being rude and disrespectful and do as her aunt asked, she reluctantly obliged. Satisfied that she was wearing it, her aunt then said something in Hmong to her grandmother before leaving the room to go to bed for the night. Once she was gone, while her father and mother continued to work out scheduling details to see when they could each stay at the hospital with Kevin, Nicole asked Mai, "Grandma, do you really, truly think these bracelets work?" "Yes, of course they do," Mai replied without any hesitation, sounding a bit insulted. And then based off of Nicole's incredulous expression, she added, "I know you do not believe in the old ways, but the old ways do believe in you. It is very real, Nicole. I have seen many things you would not believe. It is not superstition. And your brother needs protection now more than ever, while he is so vulnerable." "But, Grandma," Nicole replied, "don't you think it's strange how he was fine before he ever put the bracelet on? But once he started wearing it, he began to have nightmares and now he can't wake up?" "It is the only reason he is still alive," her grandmother barked. "The bracelet is not the problem. It is part of the solution. My sister sensed that the Dacho was coming for your brother. If she had not given him this protection, he might already be dead." Nicole paused and wondered if it was possible for there to be any truth to what her grandma was saying. She still didn't believe in any of this, but she also felt desperate and thought trying whatever just couldn't hurt. After a contemplative pause, she asked, "Can Aunt Lee do anything else? Can she wake him up?" "No, she does not have that power," her grandmother snapped, "but a shaman does. Helping break the curse Kevin is under will require powerful magic. A sacrifice must be made." Mai's voice was rising. It was obvious she wanted her son and Sherry to hear her. "This is all happening because of your mother," she continued, "because she disrespected the shaman. She forbid him from protecting our family." "Mom, enough. We're not doing this, not now." Yang scolded his mother, who now began to talk loudly and rapidly to her son in Hmong. Whatever she was saying, while Nicole couldn't understand the words, she knew it was about her mom, and it wasn't good. Mai had been mad at her son for almost 30 years now for marrying a white woman and not a Hmong girl. While Mai and her son now argued about what was nonsense superstition and what was real when it came to the safety of the Vu family, Kevin was literally staring a very dangerous living relic of the old ways in the face.
"Give me your life,"
the monstrous old woman rasped as she placed her filthy claws on either side of Kevin's feet and began to pull herself up onto his hospital bed. Kevin wanted to scream. He was trying to scream. He was trying to throw himself off of the bed, to kick her, to hit her, anything. But no matter how much he concentrated, no matter how much he struggled, his body would not move. His voice would not come to him. All he could do was lie in terror and helplessly watch as the Dacho, the Night Hag, the pressing demon, fully pulled herself up onto his bed. As he listened to the beep of his heart monitor quicken in its pace, as he heard nurses and doctors and the families of patients walk past his open door from behind the curtain that surrounded his bed, the curtain he so desperately wished he didn't have so someone could see and help him, the old witch sat on his chest. She leaned forward, bending over, and repeated her dark request as gluttonous drool dripped from her mouth down onto his face.
Give me your life.
She leaned forward further still, placing her mouth no more than an inch from his own, her beady, terrible eyes burrowing into his, leaving him feeling like she was violating his very soul, and she began to inhale deeply and unnaturally. Kevin felt his essence being pulled out of his lungs. He had the fleeting thought that if he was a character in a video game, his health bar would be steadily lowering. It felt both surreal, a sensation that was impossible to explain, like your soul being surgically separated from your body, and uniquely painful. As the monster tore more and more of him out of him, Kevin's vision faded further and further, his heart monitor beeping slower and slower, and then everything went dark, for a brief moment at least, until the next nightmare began. If someone would have been watching, they would have seen Dacho grow steadily more complete and powerful looking, and she sucked what looked like little beams of northern lights flowing directly out of Kevin's mouth and into hers. The more she sucked, the paler his skin became. The more full and powerful she looked, the more he faded. Finally, once she had satiated herself, she let him go drift back into dreams. Terrible, terrible dreams. She could have taken all of him in that first feeding, but he was so young and strong and healthy. She knew that if she let him live a bit longer and dream a bit more, there would be plenty more fear she could feed on. Plenty more life force would build back up inside of him that she could take the following night or the night after that. And also, hurrying was not her way. Why rush? Feeding, getting her meals good and scared, then literally tasting their terror, letting their horrified essence fill her to her very bones. It was what she lived for. It was all that she lived for, her only purpose. She might as well savor a meal as rich as this before moving on to the next. And the next was already so close. And while she waited for Kevin to recharge a bit, she could prepare her next meal with more delicious nightmares. Nicole couldn't sleep when she lay down in bed after what had to have been the worst and strangest day of her life. How could she sleep with her brother still in the hospital, lost inside his own body somehow, suffering from a bout of missing consciousness so rare it clearly didn't make sense to the doctors? She got dressed and headed out for a walk to try and clear her head. She headed a few blocks from her parents' house over to the Presidio. It was still surprisingly safe despite the growing homeless encampments and rising crime around the city, thanks to park rangers patrolling it 24 hours a day and an additional police presence. Nicole felt so lucky to have grown up where she did, in the middle of the West Coast's most dense urban area with all of its culture and amenities, but also less than a mile from the ocean and the beach, less than half a mile from the peaks of various hills that had the most amazing views of the bay and the Golden Gate Bridge, and mere blocks from the big, protected, wooded areas, some tiny streams, and a little lake that lay inside the Presidio. She had so many memories of all of these places going back to when she was just a little child. So many memories, and almost all of them she shared with Kevin. Nicole continued to worry deeply about her older brother as she entered a wooded area of the park. Even as an attractive young woman walking alone, she didn't worry. She'd never... Wait, what was that? Up ahead on the trail, she saw the dark shadow of what looked like a man run out of the woods to the left of the trail, pause and seem to look at her from the trail, and then run off into the woods to the right of the trail. Weird. Probably someone tweaking on meth or something similar, she thought. She had certainly had plenty of memories of seeing people high on everything you could possibly imagine and acting all kinds of crazy. She paused, wondering if she should keep walking in the same direction or turn around and head back home. She decided that whoever they were, they probably had kept on running, so she should be fine. The park rangers would be grabbing them any second anyway. So she continued down the trail and... Nicole screamed out in both surprise and pain as she felt something slice across her back. When she turned to see who had hurt her, she saw what was maybe not a man running into the woods. They had no features, only a shadowy form, but they'd cut her with something. She reached around and felt above her kidney, and when she pulled her hand back, there was some blood on her fingers. Now she didn't feel safe in the park, not at all. Time to go home, immediately, and don't think too hard about what the fuck that thing was. She turned around, and her stomach dropped. The path didn't look right anymore, not at all. She could no longer see the city, only the woods. She spun all the way around and there was nothing but forest in every direction, which was not possible. She looked up and there was the most stars she had literally ever seen in the sky. Far too many, far too lit up to be seen from a big city. Where was she? And it was quiet, way too quiet. She couldn't hear the sounds of any other people or cars or the distant music from clubs or bars. But she could hear her heart. It was racing. Ah! Nicole screamed out again and fell to her knees after another one of those shadowy things sprinted impossibly fast behind her and sliced the back of her upper leg, right across the middle of her hamstring. She instinctively grabbed at the wound, and it was bleeding worse than the previous one. The cut was much deeper. She tilted her head and just barely caught the shadow slowly and silently disappearing into the forest and behind the trees. "Help me!" she cried out. "Someone help me! I'm being attacked!" Frantically looking around in every direction, hoping to anticipate the next time one of those things came for her, she reached for her phone and dialed 911. She was about to beg for assistance when someone picked up, but it was no dispatcher. It sounded like the raspy whisper of an actual monster.
I'm coming for you, Nicole. Coming to take you, to make you give me your life.
Ah! Nicole screamed and literally threw the phone away from her. Panicking and starting to sob, beginning to have trouble breathing, she pulled herself back up and started to limp down the trail. Her leg was bleeding badly. Blood had already filled up her shoe. Ah! Her other leg was now slashed. The deepest gash yet. One of those fucking things had cut nearly halfway into her hamstring. And now she couldn't run. She could barely crawl. The pain was immense. "Leave me alone!" she screamed in terror. 3 shadowy things now walked out of the forest towards her. Not running this time. As she crawled and desperately struggled to get away from them, scraping the skin off of her knees on the pavement in the process, they continued to steadily approach and slash at her. Ah! One lunged forward and cut her across the upper back. Ah! Another lunged forward and sliced open her left arm, nearly severing the tricep in half. She could no longer push off with that arm to crawl. Ah! Another slice, her right shoulder this time. Now she couldn't hold herself up in a crawling position at all, and lay helpless on her stomach, bleeding badly from several serious wounds, wondering what these things would do to her next. One of them grabbed Nicole and flipped her over on her back, and then they all disappeared. Completely. She couldn't see or hear any of them, but she could hear something else coming for her. Something with claws that click-clacked along the paved trail. Something breathing ragged, animalistic breaths. And then it was above her. It looked like a cross between a troll and a witch.
Give me your life.
It rasped. It was the creature from the phone, and it crawled up and sat atop Nicole's chest. It leaned forward and began to literally suck the life from her body. Ah! Nicole screamed herself awake. She'd never went for a walk after all. She didn't have as much trouble sleeping as she'd thought, because she had clearly nodded off and fallen directly into the most vivid and intense nightmare of her life. Some fucking protection, she said, as she pulled off her bracelet and threw it on her desk. She sat up and glared at the door to her bedroom. She was surprised by how she felt. She was more angry than shaken up or scared, and more suspicious of her aunt than ever. Something isn't right with that creepy bitch, she muttered to herself. She laid back down and, wanting to test a new theory she just thought of, was soon able to fall back asleep for about 2 hours. When she woke, just like she'd suspected, she hadn't had any more nightmares. She then got out her laptop and started to do some digging on the Dacho. "I'm so sorry that I don't have more to tell you, Sherry," said an exasperated Dr. Laura Kramer. "You're right. He did lose some weight. Almost 5 pounds since yesterday. And I know how maddening it must be to hear me say this, but it doesn't do any of us, certainly not Kevin, any good for me to lie to you. I can't explain it. It makes no sense. We're continuously feeding him intravenously, and he hasn't been perspiring or discharging his waste into his catheters at a rate that would account for the weight loss. It's the Dacho, Mai interjected. It's preying on him. It's feeding on him. What is the Dacho? Dr. Kramer asked Kevin's grandma. It's nothing. It's Hmong superstition, Kevin's mother insisted dismissively. It is not superstition, Mai retorted angrily. If you do not start looking to the old ways, stubborn woman, you will lose my grandson. I can't do this right now, Sherry said near tears, and she left the room. Mom, Yang snapped, stop. I will not, Mai protested, and then turned to shake her finger at the doctor. Your ways do nothing. I must save my grandson. I return with my own doctor. And with that, she stomped out of the room, and her son followed. Dr. Kramer, now alone in the room with Kevin, stared at him with concern. While she had told his sister that it was normal for someone in a coma to experience some sort of REM cycle, what was definitely not normal, and what she had not yet told Kevin's family, was for them to seemingly only experience REM sleep. Every single time she had checked on Kevin over the past 2 days, without exception, his eyes had been moving rapidly under their lids. She'd asked the nurses to also pay attention to whether or not his eyes were moving, and they too had found them experiencing rapid eye movement literally every single time they checked. Typically, only about 20 to 25% of your total sleep time will be spent in REM. The highest percentage of REM sleep ever recorded has come from newborns, with just over 50% of their sleep spent in REM. But 100% of the time, it was quite literally unheard of. It should be impossible. REM sleep is part of a sleep cycle along with non-REM sleep that can be either light or deep, and all night long you cycle back and forth between non-REM and REM. What you never do is fall straight into a state of dreaming and just never leave it. At least, before seeing what was happening to Kevin, that was something Dr. Kramer believed was impossible. She'd done a thorough check using her favorite medical research and literature databases to be sure, and just like she'd thought, no one before Kevin had ever been documented as immediately falling into REM sleep and just staying there for days, not in a coma or in regular sleep. What are you dreaming about, Kevin? She asked the comatose young man in front of her. And how am I going to wake you up? As she left the room, Dr. Kramer worried that she already knew the answer to her second question. She wouldn't. She didn't have a clue what was going on. Mom? Dad? Nicole? Grandma? Kevin stood in the kitchen of his family home in a daze. He had blood on his hands. He had blood on his shirt, but he didn't know why. There was a bloody knife laying in a very bloody sink directly in front of him. He couldn't remember how it got there. He couldn't remember how he'd got here. He had no idea what was going on, but whatever it was, it certainly wasn't good. There was just so much blood. The landline was ringing. Weird. No one ever called that number. Kevin knew he needed to find his family as fast as possible. He needed to make sure they were okay. But also, he felt like this call was important. Very important. And whoever was calling would have answers he needed. So he picked up the receiver. Hello? Instead of someone answering, he just heard screaming in the background from multiple people. From what sounded like his family. Amongst the cacophony of terrible, frightened yells, he could hear his sister Nicole begging someone also named Kevin. Please, Kevin, please stop. Why are you doing this? Why'd you kill Grandma? Then he heard a voice that sounded a lot like his own. Exactly like his own. Reply. I had to, Nicole. Don't you understand? I have to kill you all. She must be fed. I have to give her life. She'll never leave me alone until she feeds. Kevin then heard his sister scream as it sounded like she was being stabbed. Next, he heard his dad, who sounded like he was already badly injured, begging this other Kevin, maybe other, to stop. No, son, no. Please just feed me to her. Let her take me and then call for help. You can still save your sister, son. You can still save your mother, please. Shut the fuck up! I have to feed her, all of you! There's no other way! It's the only way she'll let me go! Kevin now hears more stabbing sounds, and then his dad falling silent. His sister has fallen silent as well. He can only hear one voice left, the voice of his mother. She's whimpering. She's gurgling on what he assumes to be her blood. And after the sound of a bit more slashing, she's quiet. And now a new voice comes on the phone. one that speaks directly into the receiver. One Kevin both can't place, but still recognizes somehow.
Not enough. Kevin, I need more. Give me your life.
And with that, the line goes dead. Kevin drops the receiver and slowly shuffles around, seeing blood splattered everywhere, all around him. He feels like he's about to throw up. His body shakes and grows cold. He's fighting back tears and refusing to accept what is becoming more obvious by the second. No. I didn't do that. I didn't do that, Kevin screams. Kevin then suddenly feels compelled to open the refrigerator, but also terrified of what he'll find inside. He pushes past his fear and grabs the handle, a handle completely covered in drying blood. He needs to know. He has to open it. No. No, Kevin repeats as he slowly opens the door. He screams again. Inside are the heads of his family, 4 of them stacked in a macabre pile. While he still screams, Kevin feels strange hands settling upon his shoulders, long, ragged, jagged, needle-like claws scratched lightly against his chest. He feels a big messy nest of hair pressing up against his neck and hot breath in his ear.
Not enough, Kevin. Give me your life.
And then he wakes up, or at least thinks he wakes up. But he will soon realize he's trapped inside yet another new nightmare, one in a never-ending stream. Mom! It's Nicole. She just made it to the hospital for the day after spending hours and hours in her room on her computer. She had first found her dad in Kevin's room. Kevin, who now didn't look nearly as healthy as the day before. Kevin, who looked pale and weak. Her dad told her about her mom and grandma both leaving the room and about what her grandma wanted to do. And to her father's great surprise, Nicole told him she was thrilled that her grandma was going to find a shaman. That she had been, in fact, planning on asking her grandma to do just that. She also made her dad show her his bracelet, and it had 1 hole in the moonstone. Not 3 like hers, not 3 like Kevin's. Nicole had suspected that her and her brother's bracelets would be different than the others after what she had found researching the Dacho. And when she asked her dad if he'd had any nightmares the past few days, also like she suspected, he had not. That was when she ran out to go find her mom. Hey, baby, have you seen your brother? A very defeated and exhausted-looking Sherry asked her daughter. Have they figured out anything since I left? Yeah, I just saw Kevin, Mom, and they haven't learned anything new, but maybe I have. Sherry's eyes lit up. Really? What? How? Nicole pointed at her mother's wrist. Give me your bracelet. What? Please, Mom, just take it off and give it to me. Confused and curious, Sherry said, Okay, here. And she handed her daughter the bracelet Aunt Lee had given her. Nicole immediately inspected the moonstone, smiled, and shouted, I fucking knew it! You knew what? Sherry asked. She wanted to share in her daughter's excitement, but her head was spinning. She was utterly bewildered. Nicole ignored her mother's question. Every second mattered, and she had more important questions of her own. She asked her mother, Have you had any nightmares since you first put this on? Sherry was completely exasperated. She looked like she wanted to scream. What are you talking about, Nicole? I can't handle anything else right now. Mom, I'm not crazy. I don't have time to explain. Please, just trust me. Have you had any nightmares lately? No, I don't think so. Mom, I can't explain how I know right now, but I will soon. But I think we can save Kevin. And I'm almost positive that Aunt Lee is behind all of this. Aunt Lee? Nicole, please, tell me what's going on. Sherry was near tears, but there just wasn't time. Soon, Mom, soon. Right now I have to go back and check on Kevin. Promise me, you will not stop Grandma if she comes back and wants to do any of her weird Hmong magic. Let her bring a shaman. Let him cut the head off a fucking chicken. Let him cut the head off anything other than one of us. I don't give a fuck what he wants to cut. Let him cut it. And now I really have to go. Sherry stared silently, open-mouthed, at her daughter as she ran off. The past 2 days, it felt like a bad dream, and life felt even more surreal and dreamlike now. Nicole sprinted across the hospital and back to her brother's room. As she ran, she thought, You pointed that shit right at him, and me too. You served us up on a platter to a monster, you old bitch, and you're gonna pay for fucking with me and my family. When she made it into Kevin's room, she immediately walked around the nurse who was checking on her brother and pulled the bracelet off his wrist. Hey, what are you doing? The nurse snapped. Maybe saving his life. You wouldn't understand. It's a Hmong thing, Nicole said without looking at the nurse. Then she stared right at her and put a finger in her face. "Whatever you do not take off the bracelets I'm putting on his wrists. I'm fucking serious. Do not take them off. Don't fuck with me." "Okay, don't talk to me like that," the nurse said warily, looking at Nicole like she'd had a psychotic break. Nicole put her mother's bracelet on one of Kevin's wrists and her father's on the other. She told her dad to make sure that no one took off the bracelets, that it was very important, a literal matter of life and death, and to tell the hospital that Aunt Lee was to never enter Kevin's room under any circumstances. Yang nodded silently, also looking at Nicole like she'd lost her mind. And then as she ran out of the room, Nicole called her grandma. About an hour later, Nicole and her grandma were sitting together at a coffee shop a few blocks from their house. "What is all this? Why could we not meet at home?" a flustered and confused Mai asked her granddaughter. "Because I couldn't risk your sister hearing us," said Nicole sternly. "Hey, what are you talking about? What does it matter what she hears? She cannot speak English." "Maybe, maybe not," answered Nicole. "I'm not sure what she can and can't do anymore." "What do you mean when you say that?" Nicole reached across the table and took Mai's hand in her own and stared intensely into her eyes. "Grandma," she said with some emotion in her voice, "I believe you now." Her grandma turned her head quizzically. "Believe me how?" she asked. "Why are you talking so crazy, Nicole?" "Grandma, I believe you about the old ways," Nicole told her urgently. "About Dacho." Mai paused and studied her granddaughter to make sure she wasn't fooling with her. "Why now?" she asked. Nicole squeezed Mai's hand tightly, so tight it hurt a bit. "Because I saw her, Grandma. I saw Dacho in my dreams last night." Mai was still skeptical. She pulled her hand away from her granddaughter and sipped her tea. Her son had not believed in the old ways since he was still a child. Her grandchildren had never believed, not even when they were small. Their mother had made sure of that. "How do you know you saw her?" she asked. Nicole described what happened. "Grandma, it was in a dream," she said, "but it was unlike any other I've ever had. Such a terrible nightmare. And right before I woke up, she came for me. She looked like an old naked witch, with long arms and legs and claws, with wild bushy white hair and cold black beady eyes. Her skin looked like it was rotting, and she sat on my chest, Grandma. I couldn't move to fight her. And she tried to suck the life out of me before I woke up." Mai sat silently and took all this in, studying Nicole. "Grandma, that's her, isn't it?" her granddaughter asked. "That's Dacho. She told me to give her my life." Mai's eyes widened. She was starting to believe Nicole. Yes, maybe you saw her," she said. "But what does this have to do with Lee?" "Lee is who brought Dacho into our family," Nicole insisted. "And she handed it Kevin." "No!" Mai snapped loudly enough to cause everyone else in the coffee shop to stare at her and Nicole. "That's not possible! She would never! How dare you be so disrespectful to my sister!" Nicole again reached forward and took Mai by the hand. "Grandma, she did. And she tried to give me to Dacho too. Let me explain." Nicole now told her grandmother about how Kevin's bracelet had 3 holes in the stone, not one like her mother's or her father's or the one that Mai herself was wearing. She explained how her father had not had any nightmares lately, and neither had her mother. Mai admitted she hadn't either, and neither had Nicole until the night she put on her bracelet, a bracelet that also had 3 holes in the moonstone instead of just 1. But then after she woke, she took it off, and when she fell back asleep, no more nightmares. And so she got on her computer and did some research. She found a Hmong language forum about the Dacho, and she spent hours on it, using a translation program to search for what she wanted. And after a while, she found a thread about hag stones, also called serpent's eggs, polished stones with holes in them. She read about how some Hmong had figured out how to use them as protection charms. But then, digging further, she found that these charms could be altered, turned into the exact opposite of what they were intended to be. If you added 2 more holes to the stones and charmed them with some sort of inverted protection ritual, they became beacons or magnets for the Dacho. They also weakened the wearer's natural resistance while leading the Night Hag right to them. Mai listened carefully to everything Nicole was saying. Most of it was what she already believed to be true. She had heard of protection charms against the Dacho long ago, but she had never heard of the opposite, and she was a bit reluctant to believe it was possible to help target someone to be fed to Dacho. Fortunately, Nicole had printed out numerous pages from the forum where all of this was written about in Mai's native tongue, and she handed them all over to her grandmother. About 10 minutes later, when she was done skimming them, Mai looked at her granddaughter solemnly and shook her head. "I see," she said. Maybe you are right. Why would she do this? She had never met you and your brother before a few days ago. She had never been to this country. But she knows you, Grandma. Does she have a reason to be angry with you? To be jealous of you? Mai sat in quiet reflection for what felt like a few minutes before answering. Yes, she finally said, breaking the tense silence. Yes, maybe she does. And then Mai suddenly looked years younger and also fierce and determined. We need to go to the hospital now, she stated. I need to be there when the shaman arrives. Nicole almost squealed with delight. She felt the most hope she'd felt since this all began. Okay, Grandma, that's good. Yes, give him those pages I gave to you. You give them yourself, Mai said, shooting Nicole a puzzled look. I need to do something else first, Grandma, said Nicole. But I'll be there soon, I promise. Please trust me. I do trust you, said Mai. And then after a pregnant pause, she added, I am glad you finally trust me as well. That stung a bit. Nicole had been so dismissive of her grandma her whole life about everything she did or believed that was not traditionally American, that wasn't part of the world of Nicole and her friends. I'm so sorry, Grandma, she now said genuinely. I should have listened more, and from now on I will. I love you, Grandma. I love you too, Nicole, Mai replied through misty eyes. And then she smiled and added as she rose from her chair, pointing her finger at Nicole, Now hurry up and meet me at the hospital soon. Do not fuck this up. After the initial shock wore off, Nicole laughed and gave her grandma a huge hug. She had literally never heard the woman swear before. It was the first time she'd laughed since before Kevin didn't wake up. Okay, Grandma, I won't. I know you will not. And do not act so surprised. I am old, but I am cool. You are cool, Grandma. You're cool as fuck. Mai laughed a bit now before her face became serious and determined, and she turned around and walked briskly towards her car as Nicole did towards hers. Both understood their missions clearly, and both knew what was at stake if they failed. While Mai drove to the hospital to meet a Hmong shaman and help with a ceremony designed to break the Dacho's deadly hold over her grandson Kevin, Nicole headed home to confront her treasonous aunt. When she walked to the front door, she found Lee in the living room, sitting on the couch and reading a book, looking like all was right in the world and she hadn't just sold out 2 members of her own extended family to be murdered by a monster. As Lee glanced up at her, Nicole spoke the only 2 sentences she had ever learned how to say in Hmong, and she had just learned them. I know what you did to my brother. I know you fed him to the Dacho. Lee looked stunned for a moment, but then she smiled, shrugged, and said something in Hmong. You just heard the only words I know in Hmong, you wretched old bitch, Nicole sniped. I don't know what you're saying, and I don't care. It doesn't matter why you did what you did. It only matters that you did it. And now I'm going to make you pay for it. She aggressively started to step closer to her aunt, but then froze when she noticed movement from down the hall in her peripheral vision. She turned to look closer, and in the darkness, she saw eyes. 2 dark, beady, hungry eyes. And the shape of the Night Hag surrounded them. No, Nicole breathlessly whispered in fear. How is she here? I'm not asleep. Aren't you? Lee said, startling her niece by speaking in English. Fuck you, you evil bitch, Nicole shouted at her aunt, who now sported a sly grin. You're fucking with me. I'm not asleep. Maybe. Maybe not, taunted Lee. Maybe it not matter. You took him before she finished. Now she feed on you. Nicole turned back towards the hallway and watched the old witch slowly approach her from the darkness. She wanted to turn and run, but that wouldn't end this. Instead, she looked back at Lee. Why did you do it? If I'm going to die anyway, you might as well tell me. Mai left me to die, her aunt sneered. She know better than me. It was not just Viet Cong that kill us. It was Dacho. She take many from village. She take brother. She take father. She take husband. Mai leave me. She leave for Dacho to take. But I make deal. I make deal to find other for her to feed. I choose. And she now never take me. Now I have children. I have grandchildren. She never take them while I live. But I old now. I must take her far away from family, give her new body to feed on before I die. Keep my own family safe. Keep them safe by bringing that monster to us, Nicole shouted. You do the same, Lee shouted back as Dacho crept closer, ever closer. No, I wouldn't, Nicole said before she revealed a sly smile of her own. But I will do this. In a flash, Nicole lunged out at her great aunt, knocking her off the couch and pushing the old woman to the ground. She quickly pinned her and sat on her chest, much like Dacho sat on her in her nightmare. And with Lee's arms pinned to her sides, Nicole reached down and tore off her protection bracelet. She replaced it with 2 others, the cursed beacons that Lee gave her and Kevin. Then, as Dacho continued to draw near, she choked her aunt fiercely. She squeezed her windpipe, cutting off her air supply. She kept choking her, not long enough to kill her, not quite long enough for the Dacho to approach close enough to grab Nicole and stop her, but hopefully long enough for Lee to lose consciousness. Hopefully long enough for her aunt to go to sleep, where, with not one but two magnets for this monster on her body, she would dream the most terrible dreams. Kevin sat with his father about 10 rows up in the stands behind third base at Oracle Park. It was a day game, and it was especially warm and sunny for the Bay Area. The Giants were up 3-1 in the Dodgers. Logan Webb was on the mound, dominating. "What a perfect day, huh?" his dad asked, smiling, as he put his arm around Kevin's shoulders. Looking up and not seeing a cloud in the sky, with a cold beer in his hand, his team up on the Dodgers, and all this only a short walk from the house, so they didn't even have to worry about traffic when they had to leave, Kevin agreed. "Yeah, this is great, Dad. Thanks for taking me." "Of course," his dad replied before taking his arm off of Kevin's shoulders and clapping and joining in a cheer of, "Let's go Giants! Let's go Giants!" Kevin started to join in as well as he tried to think about how they got to the game. It bothered him that he couldn't remember. Also, was something bad happening before the game? He felt like it was. Like things hadn't been right lately, but he couldn't remember why. And then he saw her. Dacho, the pressing demon, the Night Hag. She was sitting 5 or 6 rows in front of them. She had turned around in her seat, facing Kevin, staring directly at him and filling him with dread and terror. He realizes immediately that she's the bad thing he can't remember, that she's dangerous. And while he can't remember the details regarding how, he knows she has been tormenting him. "Dad? Dad? Dad!" Kevin now yelled to get his father's attention. He pointed at Dacho and asked, "Who is that, Dad? Who is that scary-looking woman?" "What woman? What are you talking about, Kevin?" Yang replied. Kevin looked at his father. "You really don't see her. She's right." She disappeared. She was no longer sitting there. Some young red-haired girl was sitting in her place. I don't know where she went," Kevin stammered as he looked around. "She was right there. I don't know how she could have disappeared." "Maybe you just imagined her," Yang said calmly, his eyes returning to watch the game. "Don't worry about it." "No," Kevin insisted. "Dad, she was... Ah!" Now Dacho was sitting directly beside Kevin. He was sandwiched between the monster and his father, but no one seemed to notice or care. No one even gave them a second glance as she placed her powerful claws upon his shoulders and started pushing him down. "Dad!" Kevin cried out, panicking. "Dad, help!" Kevin continued pleading as Dacho pushed him all the way down to the concrete floor, pinning his arms behind his head as she climbed up and sat on his chest. "Come on, son," his dad said back, as if everything were totally fine, as if his son was not being attacked right next to him. "Don't worry about her, just enjoy the game. You're gonna miss a strikeout."
Give me your life,
the old witch rasped as she bent forward to put her mouth in a position to suck out what was left of Kevin's soul. "Dad, please!" Kevin screamed. "Someone, anyone, please help me!" Kevin yelled at the thousands of people who surrounded him at the sold-out game. But still, no one cared. Some people looked, but they just smiled, like he was playing around. Others saw him and laughed, but no one helped. And Kevin couldn't seem to help himself. As his dad and the other fans seated around them broke out into another round of cheers of, "Let's go Giants! Let's go Giants!" The Dacho began to inhale. Kevin, feeling his life fading, made one last attempt to push the Night Hag off of him. He screamed and put everything he had into desperately trying to sit up. Ah! And that was how Kevin finally woke up, screaming. And now, sitting up and awake in his hospital bed, he still heard cheering, but not from anyone at the baseball game. Instead, it came from his parents and grandmother, from a shaman holding a headless chicken in his hand, blood from its neck dripping down onto the floor, from a shocked-looking doctor. "Where am I?" he asked. "Am I still dreaming?" "No, son. You're back. You're at the hospital," his mother said as tears of relief began to stream down her cheeks. "What happened?" he asked. "So much," his father said. "So very much." His father and grandmother were now also hugging him. The doctor was crying. The shaman was smiling. But someone was missing. "Where's Nicole?" he asked. "Get off! Hlee managed to yell after pulling her right arm free and punching her niece in the neck. She might be old, but she was far from weak. She twisted and lifted her hips and threw Nicole off of her and to the side. She ripped the bracelets from her wrists and put them on Nicole instead. "You not feed me, I feed you! Dacho is my monster," she hissed. Then she backed away and watched with great curiosity as Dacho grabbed and pinned her young niece and then climbed atop her chest. Over the decades, Hlee had fed so many to the old witch. Dozens. But she'd never, until now, watched it work its dark and deadly magic. She'd never seen it suck the soul out of someone's body. She was surprised by the rich colors of the beam flowing from Nicole's mouth and into the hag's. She was not surprised by the look of unimaginable horror in Nicole's eyes as her spiritual interior was ripped loose from her body, as her life force was torn from her being and consumed. And then the horror in her eyes was replaced by an unsettling nothingness. Her lights had gone out. The last trace of Nicole was no longer inside of her, and what was her body just moments ago was now her corpse. Dacho had fed once again. And another victim will appear as if they had only died unexpectedly in their sleep. Another case of Sun's sudden, unexplained nocturnal death syndrome. A deadly malady doctors still had no explanation for, and one that affected the Hmong people more by far than any other ethnicity on Earth. Hlee had long wondered where Dacho went in between feedings. Did she disappear? Where did she hide? She didn't, at least not this time, go anywhere. This time, she stood up and stared at Hlee. Hlee felt her chest tighten, her stomach sink. To be looked at by the old witch was to be terrified, and instinctively Hlee started to back away. The Dacho, staring at her with its small, dark, panic-inducing eyes, stepped forward. And now, for the first time in many, many years, since their deal was made, Hlee felt the creature's malevolence directed fully towards her. No, we have deal!" Hlee shouted in Hmong. The Dacho ignored her and took another step forward. "Stop!" Hlee commanded. And then she begged and bargained. "Please, I can give you my sister. Don't do this. I can give you her son, my nephew." The Dacho continued to ignore her and took another silent step forward. Hlee tried to back away further, but ran into the wall behind her. She now had nowhere left to move. "Wait, stop!" she shouted. "I can take you to other cities where there are many other Hmong." The Dacho took another step and placed its claws on Hlee's shoulders as she began to scream. It pushed her down to the floor. It climbed atop her chest to ride her as the Night Hag, and it began to suck out her soul. While her niece Nicole's face was the last face she had seen while she was awake, the face of the monster she had served for so long was the last thing Hlee saw in one final dream. One last and deadly nightmare. As Nicole, alive and well, drove to the hospital, where she will find her brother already woken from his spell, where she will find a doctor forever changed, someone who will now walk in two worlds simultaneously, one of science and one of the supernatural, where she will find her family no longer divided between the old ways and the new. The Dacho, its belly not as full as it would have liked, but full enough, returned to its place of rest and slumber in between its meals. It walked into the bathroom where it saw a mirror, climbed up onto the counter, and pushed itself through. One of its many powers is to be able to use mirrors, any mirrors, as portals to travel to and fro between anywhere in our world and Merkir Hamur, the Dark World, home to its lair since time immemorial. It never needed Hlee to reach America. It only made its hollow deal with her because it enjoyed twisting someone else into something as evil as it is. It only let her believe what she believed because when you have fed as long as it has, you've grown bored and you've chosen to begin playing games just to amuse yourself. And it has fed for so long. Ever since Joyful, the architect, the designer of all great and terrible beasts, first created it. And it will continue to do so until someone figures out how to finally kill it. It is not immortal. When it feeds, it is flesh and able to be captured or destroyed. But it has yet to ever feel threatened, and it has been alive so long it has forgotten it could someday die. Whoever it feeds next, one thing is for certain. It will not feed on the Vu family. Not anymore. Hlee will be its last meal from the Vu family, at least in San Francisco. The Vus, under Mai's guidance, have now all become experts in the old ways. They practice the proper rituals. They make the appropriate sacrifices, pay the proper respects, wear the correct serpent's eggs. They are now united against ancient forces of evil. Forces they all now know, without a hint of doubt, are just as real as anything anyone has ever written about in a book of history or science. And that's it for this Halloween week re-release of Nightmare Fuel. That is the final re-release. Hope you enjoyed it. Sleep paralysis, such a terrifying thing. I first heard about the Dacho from a Hmong man from Laos, I believe, Si Vu, when I interned for him and some other social workers at Child Protective Services, what feels like a lifetime ago. Si Vu fully believed in this monster's existence and its ability to kill. For anyone curious, I chose stories that would stand alone for these revisits, even though my favorite ones are probably the ones that span multiple episodes. But also, all these stories feel like my babies. Spend a lot of time inhabiting each of these worlds, and they all, in a way, feel like home. Today's tale was written by me, Dan Cummins, scored by Logan Keith. Thank you once again to the folks at AMC's FearFest for sponsoring these re-releases, for showcasing so many awesome classic horror movies all month long. I hope some of you enjoyed these all over again, and that you're excited for tomorrow's new Nightmare Fuel story. Please go to badmagicproductions.com for all your bad magic needs, including all show-related merch. Happy Halloween week, only one day to go, and stay scared.
Bad Magic Productions.